Do it.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wait, what's this called? Big announcement coming soon? Yeah, 5, 4, 3. Welcome to the Big Announcement Coming Soon podcast. I'm one of your many hosts, Michael Bohl, and we're here. I have a full house here today with Jeff Renson, David Clay, and Nick Garvin. Good to see you all, gentlemen.
GM.
What's up?
Yeah, we were chatting before the show. I asked the question, hey, why do we even bother all this sort of research stuff if just going to track the S&P 500? And David said, but that's not true. And then Jeff said, start the show. So David, go ahead and respond to that, would you?
Yeah, totally, for sure. I think tracking stuff is interesting. It's like if something tracks for 75% of the time and then it breaks away for it 25% of the time, is it true that it tracks it? I mean, yeah, I guess so. But like for that 25% of the time, you made ridiculous gains on it breaking away from the trend for some reason. So you could probably say that like GME or AMC stock all track the trend for a while, and then all of a sudden some stuff happens. So it's kind of like any asset. You position yourself, and yeah, it does track it most of the time because it's just floating along with buyers who are who are essentially general algorithmic buyers who buy across the market. If it goes up, it goes down, and then a narrative takes over and it pushes it higher. Now, will that usually happen when things are bullish in other markets? Probably, because that's generally how money works. It's just like, okay, we have more money to invest in risk assets. Right. One day, people would argue, well, Bitcoin will actually perform better in times of sorrow.
That's what it's supposed to do.
It's an inflation hedge, yeah. But one could argue that that's, maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the track or something. I mean, gold doesn't even do that.
When you start, so or it may never happen when you shoot it out like that.
Sure, exactly. Sure. It's still an experiment in that sense. And so, I mean, gold doesn't even do that currently. So but the interesting thing where you could see that maybe happening is when gold starts doing that and Bitcoin starts tracking gold rather than tracking the S&P or whatever. And so it might be correlated a while, and then just recently, the DXY has started going up pretty hardcore, and Bitcoin hasn't dropped.
The dollar strength index, like the value of the dollar against other things.
Yeah, well, that's where the safe money goes. If if you want to hedge inflation or whatever, you run to the dollar.
Yeah, everything should go down when the dollar goes up, but Bitcoin has been at least holding pat. So you could argue that's a different type of different decorrelation for this period of time, and a very important one because it's holding value, which means people are still buying it even while this is going down, because you have to soak up a certain amount of Bitcoin every day that's printed into the market from miners.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
miners like people below 18.
By the time there's more people who understand and believe in and hold Bitcoin, it keeps on bringing it over to that decorrelated market. So slowly over time it gets there, but like David said, right?
What do you mean? It hasn't shown that it's getting there, so how can you make that assumption? I mean, if we were looking at 5 or 10 years out, isn't it going to just track along right with it?
This is my belief in Bitcoin, the asset, and people holding it because they believe it's a different currency, not as an in and out investment.
So you have a faith-based financial philosophy.
No, there's a number.
Believe it, therefore it will happen.
You can look at the S&P. It's gone up over the last 10 years, like 100, 200, 300% or something. And Bitcoin's gone up like 15,000 million %. And so therefore, by that metric you just introduced, it's not correlated at all, even though technically it goes up or down at the same time. That's one type of correlation. There are like many definitions of correlation.
And the amount of holders, right? They've tracked the people who are holding more Bitcoin for longer terms keeps growing. And that's that basis of people who believe in it, and they keep eating up the supply. So as that basis grows, we become more and more decorrelated. Sorry, Nick, I feel like I cut you off.
And I feel like a little fuzzy. Nick, why don't you finish?
Here's why that basis is going to continue to grow. Like to Jeff's point, is because we're just now seeing institutions come in. I mean, that's why we had a major run up, and that's why we're correlated to quarters, right? When we all kind of should have sold in October and we got wrecked in December, right? A couple years back, right? Or a year ago. What we will see and what we started to see is pensions get involved, right? And other people waiting on the sideline. Like there's a lot of liquidity waiting to get in on Bitcoin. And when we compare it to just the DXY or an opting out of that is comparable, but like you're comparing that to an asset that a lot more domains are going to be like in completely different areas of institutions are going to come into that, and that's not just like for gold, and that's not just for the DXY, right? Like we're talking about a completely different asset as the narrative and meta continue to change, right? They'll find better and better use cases.
All right, we'll see.
All right, we should probably think about El Salvador.
We should jump over to Nick's article for today, getting us started right away with NFTs. How NFTs and Web3 are bringing the new content wave. So it's just like just ChatGPT now. It's going to create an NFT, and I'm going to mint it and just make zillions.
Mid-Journey.
I mean, it depends, right? Like I think this is about if people like you or not, right? So it's more about the brand and it's paving
There
ways.
goes my
Again, it's
chance.
allowing people to opt out, right? Opting out of legacy systems, opting out of just like the stranglehold that certain big tech companies have on the internet. I mean, in essence, Web3 is about like a whole new peer-to-peer internet, right? Where if you want to mint an NFT that you made off of ChatGPT, and then sell it to me, and I want to buy it and sell it to David and Jeff, we all, everybody wins and everyone's happy, and you don't need a middleman for that. I think they're showing that the creator is the platform, and the platform is open source right now. It's not YouTube. One thing they mentioned in the article is that like blockchain is uncensorable. So you're not going to get demonetized if you make a bad piece of art or something political. So that's neat. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room there. And I think Jeff can attest to the fact that we've seen an oversaturation of this new creator frenzy. We've seen
Sure.
over 100,000 open editions in the last week.
That's good,
50,000
actually.
coming
Yeah, it's
from.
healthy for diversity for the
Yeah.
ecosphere. Won't these
Yeah.
things simply just network together though, like everything else does eventually? So you have, let's get rid of the stranglehold. So we have a lot of independence, and then that'll suddenly become a stranglehold itself until we have an article like this 5-10 years from now that repeats the process.
And
everything else has. When you look at the internet, the way humans coalesce together.
Oh, true, right? That's a cycle of all lifespans, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Including digital, it seems.
So
Yes and
Mike's-
no. I mean, I would argue the first type of digital, like almost like pre-blockchain, was peer-to-peer sharing. Pirate Bay still exists and stuff like that. So the resistance goes on.
Yeah, right. It does, which is good. It's healthy for the market. You want that sort of resistance, but it doesn't ever take over.
In a weird way, it's happening now, right? Because you're seeing people upset that, like, all right, so we talked about this on the Twitter spaces that Jeff and I did on Sunday. Somebody comes up with something very innovative, and usually that comes like the old cliche in a garage, Apple style, with a young, alternative, rebel group.
Sure.
Later, it gets mass adopted. We've seen that in certain things, whether it was open editions or burn mechanisms or other little aspects of NFT culture over the last month, particularly. And then we've seen the bigger whales, and I say whales loosely because we're talking artists in the sense, those who have a bigger platform as a creator, therefore they control their market. They've come in and they've kind of copied or taken it and they've done their own, right? So you wouldn't expect someone who's like an established artist to do a open edition, but they did it because it was catching on with the average person, someone like Jeff and myself who could make some art, sell it to someone who liked it. People then kind of, just like everything, right? Like the big companies come in, they want to share, and we've seen that happen in increments. So I do think, although that we're all fighting for the same fight, there's layers and levels to it, right?
Well, one of the layers we've missed, and Mike talked a bit about humans, is there is a human layer. Like it's on the blockchain, it's uncensorable, but Ryder rips BAYC, and then the BAYC court case is happening right now, and they're not debating the art because that they don't think they have necessarily an IP claim, but the name and the use of the idea and the logo. So there's still a place where humans interact with the blockchain and humans interact with the court system.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take, kind of what we were saying, the way you were describing that, Nick, is it's essentially like to go way back to the Renaissance or whatever, you would have had Leonardo and then all of his muses and stuff, right? And like a lot of the paintings are like partly designed by one of the muses, and then he comes in and finishes it off or whatever. And so it's kind of like it's almost like the version of copying. You're copying style, not copying the specific arts per se. And so it's like almost artists want to enhance the influence of the movement, if you will, through that kind of open.
Absolutely, and it's totally working, right? But instead of seeing a derivative of an art piece, like I made a Basquiat version of Mona Lisa, right? Instead of seeing a derivative of the art, you're seeing a derivative of the blueprint of how the art is distributed. So it's like, oh, that worked for the little guy. And then it's clearly successful because now the big guy's coming in and they're copying that blueprint.
You're talking
seeing
about
derivative
the game plan of
models,
releasing their art and burning and all the
gamification,
mechanisms
the models.
around it.
Yes, yeah. Just the engagement aspect of it. And
Are you,
again,
Are you essentially saying with this article before I started arguing with you that just making it easier for anybody to do it, at least at this point? There's a larger
Yes
platform.
and no,
That, but
right?
also I
Because
think
there's a
Nick's
lot of
saying that
noise.
there's a lot of people doing this, and in the same way that major companies jumped in to say wag me and call everybody a friend at the top,
Yeah.
big artists, they're in a microcosm, the big artists and NFTs are jumping on these ideas where smaller artists started doing these open editions and free editions, and nobody big was doing that. And now they're trying that or doing these extended burn mechanisms. The larger artists have found that. Well, I think it's the same thing with companies, right? The little guy gets to play around and has less barrier, or yeah, less barrier
They
to doing
innovate.
things.
They do the innovation,
Yeah, they
right?
can fail a little bit, whereas if you're big and you try something new, it might really hurt your brand. And they're
Mm.
learning from people who are willing to experiment, I think is what you're saying.
Right. And
Okay.
the little guys like us are doing that. And the big brands come in and they kind of take that. And that's where we're at right now in this weird microcosm. It's interesting. It's good for the space, but it's also like a weird time, like at the same time, if that makes sense.
All right, maybe we should make the jump from art to numbers. David's got an article about ordinal theory. So those of you who are still listening to the show and looking for an off ramp, is this going to be it? Is this going to be exciting, or
Well,
only nerds should stay on?
maybe after the hook, because it actually hooks really well into what
Okay, hook us, dude.
into
No
what
pressure,
Nick
no
was talking
pressure.
about. Well, interestingly enough, like on the NFT front, is ordinals have come in
Hmm.
like a raging storm, and essentially what ordinals are. So what NFTs are is a specific contract, ERC 721 or ERC 1155, which says, okay, this piece of art is represented on this blockchain, and you can buy it on OpenSea or whatever. And they come out of nowhere, right? You just make it and you mint as much art as you want and you charge whatever you want. And this exact problem is the problem, because anyone can be an artist. You just get a slew of really bad art, and then it's hard for the good artists to kind of stand out because they just get swamped, if you will. And so you kind of have that evolution that happens in any new medium where it's kind of just like all crazy, and then kind of like it comes out anyway. So ordinals are Bitcoin. So a Bitcoin protocol is really, it doesn't change very much, and there's actually a bit of, I'll get to block space at the end of this, but essentially what ordinals are a kind of, I would argue, a better way, and I kind of believe what Ordinals was saying, a better way to do NFTs. So the way you do it is you say, okay, there's one Satoshi. Every Bitcoin has a certain amount of Satoshis, and those Satoshis come into being as the block is organized and then printed onto a blockchain. So each one of them
Just
can
real
be
quick, a Satoshi being a subunit of a Bitcoin itself,
exactly,
like
yeah,
dollars and cents concept.
precisely, yeah. And so each Satoshi can be labeled in a your Satoshi 753 out of 2 million or 21 million to be produced, right? And because that Satoshi has a value, you can assign an inscription to that thing, saying go to this website to see that your NFT. And because you can then own that actual tangible piece, it can't be right-click copied. It can't be, any of this business, because it's actually a tangible thing that shows your ownership, and it's in the Bitcoin blockchain, therefore secured by Bitcoin itself and the network. And so it's vastly more like immutable. So it can't be changed because it's literally just exists, like unless all the blockchain nodes turned off or whatever. So it's almost like the Bitcoin blockchain is offering a back to roots version of NFTs. Essentially, like they're all going crazy because anyone can do them on Ethereum, but in Bitcoin, you actually have to hold that Satoshi. You have to hold, and you have to pay for it in Bitcoin. And so, like, what's interesting, the effect of this has been that the Bitcoin blockchain has started to fill up again. And so you see ordinals taking up, I think, 51% or 50% of blocks. People doing NFT activity. And I'm old enough to remember back in the day when Bitcoin blockchain being full was the biggest problem around. And it was like, oh, we have to increase the block size and SegWit and all this other stuff because it was getting impractical to use it. You could see a situation similarly, and it kind of you are, where you see the ordinal volume dropping as the Bitcoin gas price increases. And so it's actually really good for Bitcoin because Bitcoin blocks should be expensive. You shouldn't really move Bitcoin around too much if you see it as a store of value. And the reason is essentially that you don't want people speculating so much with your store of value, like buying and selling it on the market and then moving it around, because it costs more to do that each time you do it. They'll do that with the lower gas cost coins. And so Bitcoin having a high block space cost, which is what this means, each unit of block space per block is valuable and costs a lot to rent, if you will, or take advantage of, then it's very good for Bitcoin essentially, and also very good for Lightning, because Lightning will start to actually take off rather than, because right now Bitcoin hasn't been full blocks, and so why use Lightning? But
Right, that's true.
A few
very bullish.
things I want to ask about. One of the things that was also filling them up is people using part of that, like the SegWit signatures and Taproot. You can add more data in, even though the block's the same size, and putting what were they, the Taproot wizard. They were putting JPEGs in, and
those are
were filling
ordinals,
nearly a whole block. But those ones had the JPEG in it.
Those were just been experimentations, and
part
stuff.
of that was hiding the data in the SegWit and Taproot transaction data. I mean, the ordinals make sense. My biggest question, because I read through this, was, is there a wallet that will let you pick and choose? And I know you can pick your UTXOs that come in to make your transactions to go out. But if a UTXO comes in at half a Bitcoin and it's 500,000 sats, you got to pick out the one, or I guess like take the one, make it the ordinal, and then keep it separate as you send it, but then pay your gas. So you need to have like a wallet that has a bunch of UTXOs for gas and a bunch of UTXOs that represent your ordinal NFTs and separate, so you don't accidentally spend your NFT on gas, right?
And you have to do that all on your own. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there'll be a user interface for it right now.
Exactly. And that's what Ordinals probably has. But... No, Ordinals exactly has it where it segregates it.
Yeah, I guess it'll just handles it for you. You'll see it. It'll make sense to you. I'm sorry, Nick, what was that?
I was just like, when you're talking about doing it on your own, and when Jeff was explaining like the technical side of it, it's not that different than what people have had to do to sign up for a Rare Pepe wallet on XCP, with Bitcoin and stuff like that before people migrated it through vaults onto Ethereum and bridged it, right? I mean, it was that essentially, right? You had to understand the hash and the dispensers and the open aspect of it and the way the blocks close. I know. I mean, it's interesting to see. Like I said, it's a weird time in the space for NFTs. You got the ordinals coming out and the memes. I learned about it through a meme, to be honest, a Dark Farms meme, and they were all comparing it to Reddit. What do they call it? The Reddit digital avatars, right? Because we did that for a bit too. We just rebranded it, and it's still just NFTs on another blockchain. Buy this. Why?
But these really, I think, are different.
You know what I mean?
These are almost that the NFT is the Satoshi, and the Satoshi can point somewhere. Whereas the token in Ethereum that points to your picture, or that is your token for your NFT, is simply a smart contract object. It's not also Buterins.
Well, you've also seen a bunch of projects rug, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, we just don't have the funding, so we have to turn it off, and all their the NFTs that were listed through their smart contract are just gone. And so this promises you authenticity, and I think it's probably more useful because there's only a limited number of Satoshis that could be used, right? And people could just fill those up by printing like ridiculous numbers. But what would be really useful for is stuff like I guess like housing, real estate, like big important things where you're like, okay, it doesn't actually necessarily be like an NFT where you're like, oh, this points to this or whatever. And if you own it, oh, well, I lose my house. It's more like it's recorded here on this ordinal that this transaction has taken place. And then you can record it on, I don't know, in the actual Web2 world in a bank or something like that, and it can point to it as
those strange bank things.
Until when though, right? Like if we're talking about like something that's finite, right? Like then like how scalable is this, and how long do I want to put all my stuff there, knowing that?
Well, I wonder if you can. Well, I wonder if you can rewrite your ordinal or whatever. But I mean, it's kind of like ordinals. What's interesting, the one last point on this that I think is interesting, May, is that Assange apparently, well, the rumor is that Assange has put in a dead man switch as an ordinal.
Julian Assange?
So, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so like if he were to die or something would happen, and then it would trigger, it will release access to all his secret files about this, that, and whatever. And that apparently went in 2017. So this is apparently not a new thing. It's more just been discovered and rediscovered due to the NFT phase of things.
Wouldn't that incentivize reasons to kill him?
Yeah, I
No,
think that's why
because
he's in
well,
hiding.
interesting
Not by the
actually.
government, but by the secrets are about, but everybody else who wants to know what the
By
secrets
the
are.
It's like
investigators.
spoiler alert,
Oh.
spoiler alert. Like, can I just binge this and jump to the end?
Yeah. Wait, so you have to kill for the information, hey?
But it'll be on the blockchain forever, Mike.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, so we go from ordinal numbers to the mundane of the Bank of England's proposed digital pound. I actually thought these digital currencies by governments were already kind of on the market, or on the block, so to speak. Love that turn of phrase.
Yeah, the pound, they've done 2 or 3 trials already.
Well, this one, but they say they're not even going to do it till the end of the decade, which seems crazy. Limited amounts. They're worried about people doing it privately, which we do. We have all these stable coins. This would be a real stable coin that's actually tied, backed by the government itself. But again, like smaller numbers, it just seems like way late to the show, super conservative. I would imagine they pick up the pace if they actually were going to do it at some point. So if we see Bitcoin shooting back up to 60,000 or something like that, and everybody's jumping in, and I know you have SuperBowl commercials or something, then I think they'd speed that up.
That's what they're
I-
telling you. They've got, like, they have it to turn on if they want.
Right.
They've tested it
Right.
for probably the last 5 years in little bits, but it doesn't make economic sense to turn it on right now for whatever reason, or adoption.
or usually
Conspiracy.
political sense.
If
right?
you look at when the
Conspiracy
Chinese,
Sentiment, yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Well, I mean,
sentiment.
well,
No.
the XRPs,
Whoa.
the government, but they've been testing all of these governments have for a while. Like China's got theirs running when they dropped it during COVID times when things were a little different,
Yeah.
or right before, right?
Yeah,
The before
They got it
times.
testing and rolling out, and I think it's
canceled
a,
miners.
how is the public ready for this? And you don't announce we've
I'm
got
gonna-
it, and we're waiting to give it to you.
Would we even know the difference? Like, I already get on my app or whatever and transfer stuff.
That-
Even though in
that's a
America
good
it's
point.
horrifying, I might get charged $15 to do it or something. But
Yeah, I'll bring let me bring it back down to earth. I think you guys are like giving way too much credibility to everybody, including like everybody. So like, firstly, like,
so supportive.
they don't have it all figured out for sure. There's a lot to figure out in terms of CBDs. Like BIS down the road is doing research on this. Like you got to realize, like UK is like the third or fourth or fifth or sixth biggest economy in the world, right? Like GDP is a big economy. You can't just switch it over to something entirely new just like that. And so in China, like it's not like they've done it either. They've done it in sections and portions.
Oh, yeah,
and you got to
yeah.
look at what China is. Like you like WeChat is like integrated into the society. If you walk around in London, like you're still using coins and stuff for stuff.
Yeah.
Like
WeChat
you
is
take away
essentially a digital currency.
yeah, and so you're trying to take the
Right.
entire population of England and move it from I like my coins to you have a digital currency. And what that means is we can track everything that you spend at all times and
Right.
on what, and you can only have $20,000 of it in your bank account. So you better not have any more. And it, like this like huge both social move and also actually like the functionality of it. Because
Yeah,
what if you
that's-
screwed it up and like I sent my money to someone, I need it back. What's going on? Who do I
Right.
call? Do I call my
So
bank? Do I call the
that-
government? Like
2 points though. The social side though is what they have to wait for, but the first
Right.
side, it's not going to be like everybody change. It's going to be at it at the Tesco's and have trial ones.
yeah,
But
exactly.
when they start rolling it out, I'm saying I believe they could start rolling it out today, not get everybody converted on it, the whole economy change, but start piloting and getting businesses on the app.
Right.
But they're holding it back
It's-
for the second reason, for the social reasons, to time it correctly. Sorry, Nick, go for it.
No, it's not even just timing, right? It's about regulation. You're watching China experiment first with the social side of it, right? With the credit side, with the integration of everything side. You're seeing in terms of like you said, in the economy in the UK is the fifth largest one. Well, they still have to answer to the fourth, third, and first. And if they want to have tighter regulations on a CBD, then you don't think that the other smaller ones are going to follow suit? Like I think that's what's happening. The social side is there. There's a lot of conditioning that's going to be happening from now to the end of the decade or whatever. But
Sure.
that's no different than when they told everyone in Thailand, like, you can grow your own weed before they legalized weed, right? They're slow dripping it, conditioning you. But yeah, I think the weight is not just it's more of a malicious social side. It's the regulation side. And what, like you said, you made a good point, David, like you can only have 20,000 in your bank account. Like who's to say that doesn't become a thing, or X amount, like there's a lot that we don't know yet that they can encroach on.
All right, we'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
Well, I think the last point on this is that, yeah, this is why two things. One, why Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies exist, because that's almost like we were talking about before, the Pirate Bay, where it's the pushback on like, yeah, if you start to do that, people will flee your currency. That's how you open markets essentially operate that way. Like you can't do it in Russia right now. That's why the ruble's fine because no one can flee. But in the pound, if people started to put draconian laws in, they would start to do that. I think the main push behind this is economic. Like if you make money quickly, able to move around much better and much more faster than the current system, which is like an Apple IIe computer, and you can jump to like a Windows XP, whatever it is, even though it's not quite whatever, it's still massively. But to do that, to shift your entire economy and all the people, all the boomers and stuff from this to here, 8 years is, I think, generous. I don't think they'll do it in the next 15, to be honest.
All right, let's finish up with that. And that was an insult to the Apple IIe computer, of course.
I love the
let's
Apple
go over to
computer.
crypto. Super Bowl advertising will be absent this year. Now, Jeff, this is your article. I have a theory here that anytime they do advertise, the Super Bowl does advertise crypto, we should all sell.
That's exactly what I was going to talk about. A lot of people are running the headline as it was banned, and that's wrong. It wasn't. It's just not existent as far as they weren't interested in it. So Coinbase had ads last year. We favored the bold with crypto.com.
With 4 simple words that have been whispered by the intrepid since the time of the Romans. Fortune favors the brave.
And FTX did Larry David and Tom Brady are all over that.
Like I was saying, it's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
So
Wow.
it's just simply a reading the market cycles. We talk about this 4-year cycle, and the amount of people, I've worked in TV for a while, to decide to make the commercial at the company, then to hire the producers, hire the writers, get the actors, right? It's a lot of people saying, yes, 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 this is it. This is going, yes, favors the bold. Let's make these crazy statements. A lot of people go along with the vision before it gets there. It's not like Sam Bankman-Fried was hyped up. Thousands of people were hyped just around the commercial for making it. That's a picture for the wider market. So right now there's 0 commercials. It's not financial advice, but we're down. And when things are down, you buy. When they're up, you sell. So in general, we're down now. And they're not telling you to buy. At the top, they told you to buy. So right, there's not much crypto noise around. It's probably
So
a good
joke's
time
on
to buy.
them. They should be advertising it. Because
So
now
you're
it's
saying
But
the
nobody
Super Bowl-
would. Human psychology works that nobody would believe them right now. Anyway, people want to buy the top.
But we know this. I mean, we all know this as humans, that when it's low, we should buy. And when
So
it's high,
it's
we
that-
should
We don't do
that
it.
indicator to us.
I know it.
When you see the commercials everywhere, it's just another one of those reminders of time to sell. And when it's super quiet, time to buy is my only point out of this whole thing.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
did
it's
say-
important.
I was
I
going
think
to
it's
say, I did
important
say
to
to
point
Jeff
out.
when I I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
you
I'll
go.
come back to you, but I did say to Jeff when we started first talking about Bitcoin, it was like 35, and I said, well, when people like me get in, it's probably time for you to sell. He said, oh no, you're not that bad. So I guess it went up to 60 something,
Yeah, it's double.
67
right?
or something.
It's quite a
Yeah,
lot.
so maybe he was right. I was just like halfway wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's always important to look at who is saying what and why they're saying it, right? Coinbase and those the other guys, they sell crypto to people. They don't educate investors. That's not their business plan. Like they don't make money from that. So like, why would they like go to Coinbase? Hey, have you considered crypto? It's really low now. Maybe you should educate yourself on investing. And now they'll just sell it to you at the top when everyone's buying. It's way easier. Make more return for your money on investing in your advertising campaigns. Super Bowl ads are expensive, right? Got to make impact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess these
At
guys
my
don't have
TV
the money to pay
station
the $1 million bucks.
We get about 2 local spots when I used to work here, and we have to manually press the button because you don't know when they're coming. And somebody missed it the year before because I ran, I think, three Super Bowls. Yeah, we had to cut them because that was like a month's budget for the entire station was pressing that one
my
button
gosh.
on that one commercial.
You had one job kind of thing.
And
huh?
that's the local spots. Like the national spots are millions more.
Wow, crazy. Crazy. All right, well, let's finish up with that and move on to predictions. We didn't actually talk about it at the top of the show. David had suggested 26, I believe, or 23-ish.
No,
I
was
called 23
26.
last week. I'm
Okay,
taking
Jeff
my
called
clout.
23. There you go.
Totally.
All right, and Nick and I just sit on the sidelines and just make jokes about things without the risk of putting ourselves out there. So, okay, now what?
26.
26 again. I say it enough.
Yeah, 25
Well,
next week. something.
Yeah,
25.
Yeah, you think so? Really?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to look. If you
Really?
look like at the chart and you look at when we hit like 17 the first time, it was on like the big capitulation of all these cats, like 3AC and all that
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And then we like bottomed along and like all these other people went bankrupt along the way. And then finally FTX took us out down to like 16 and then we came back up above it. So like just for a thought experiment, pretend like FTX didn't go bankrupt or even just like that, just was erased from the chart. We would have gone
Sure, sure, sure.
sideways for 6 months at around this price level, even though all the things in the world have been happening, like raising interest rates and all these other crazy things. And so we're pretty much like have kind of made this a bottom for a while. So for it to collapse now below this would be pretty dramatic and actually start
didn't
shifting.
And the
What could be
DCG
worse?
thing didn't
Yeah.
kill us. After FTX, we thought DCG was the next one, and it didn't. It's almost over.
It was almost like
nobody
it's
cared.
almost like not enough people. Well, all the bad things happen, and everyone's on the side being like, "Is it going to go down more? Is it going to go down
And
more?" And then it
it's
went
back
up
to that
more.
base I was talking
And
about.
now
The people,
those
Well,
people
are we
holding
not-
why?
Are we not over like the 23-week moving average, or didn't we
Yeah,
retest? Like there's some
exactly.
charts that show that we're retesting this now. This tiny dip is a retest, right? But like it doesn't necessarily mean that it is up only. Like that's what it's a
No,
it's a
no.
proper good break if it's a break, right? And ETH's gonna go close to almost $2,000 if that's the case. But I see that maybe more sideways consolidation personally.
It's
But
like, I should have a more fair
I agree
question
with
for
you,
Nick.
but not it's not gonna be that quick. Like
Nick, because I know you're not looking at Bitcoin prices. Do you want to do like what are AKC color studies or the new meme, 6529 price is going to be next week? That's what you should call
Oh, I
it.
told you it's weird days in the space right now. Everything is going to check derivatives, check this, check that. Like all the liquidity is being sucked out by Jack Butcher, which we talked about this a couple weeks ago, right? Or at least on the Twitter space. Meme cards have dropped 50% across the board. Almost everything's dropped 50% across the board. So, with the exception of ACK and a few of those artists, the big names that we talked about earlier, a lot of people are just getting splintered because everybody bought their friend's open edition, and you can't flip that for 100x. And so, what happens when a million creators start to create a piece for $1 a piece and no one has any money left? I think that's not what's happened, but we're in a hangover period right now after a 2 or 3 week, 4 week bull market in the NFT space.
Well, and as we start an Arbitrum bull market, I don't know. I think the Arbi drop for their token's going to be soon. Dexes are launching over there. Things are blowing up. Where does that liquidity go? I wonder. And I don't think there's much crossover, but I wonder as people are taking profits on all that activity and on other alts, does any flow back into NFTs? Or those are like what's the Venn diagram of shitcoin flippers and NFT buyers? Because
that's a correlation worth looking.
People are up, 5x on some of these in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Does it flow
And
there?
vice versa.
Does it flow to ETH?
Like-
Does it flow to Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's
Well,
all
yeah, I mean-
started from all of this, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, vice versa. Like there's some projects like GMX has a NIFT line, so GBC Blueberries, whatever G stands for, Blueberry Club, and
GMX.
yeah, exactly. And so like use case basically, like when you have clubs with use case, and so like my Kampai Pandas, they just signed Roy Jones Jr.,
Jim Jones.
Bones Jones,
John Jones.
Bones Jones, and John Jones, and then some other guy from UWC that are all going to represent their gear and wear it in public, and and so like it's interesting, like tribes developing around NFT projects. I don't know. To me, they've been my biggest gainers. Ones that have like ice bags is a fucking killer. So.
All right, Nick, you want to finish us off for the night or the day?
I had something, but I lost it. But I think, it's utility, but it's also hype, right? It's utility and hype, and right now we're seeing that. And I think, like, I don't know. There was a really good point I was gonna make, but I lost it. It was about. It was not just. It's not just about like who you got. It's just like, oh, here it is. Yeah, here. It's as simple as this, right? You know the Carney game. You did that Carney game where there's a ball under like a one of those like plastic
3
cups,
cups.
and you're just moving the ball around, right? That's what we're playing here. Let's not be like fooling around. Like it's shitcoins, it's meme stuff, it's NFTs, it's whatever, ordinals now, and everyone is just looking for the liquidity, and it's in one of those balls, and we're just guessing. It's all moving around. It's all the same groups. It's the alpha group or whatever you want to call it, but it's the whales. And we're just kind of trying to make sense of it, but we'll see.
Retail isn't back yet. I agree with that. And so this ball of money rolling around is not enough to fuel the next bull run. So I would be careful if you're out there playing in it. Be ready to leave soonly, because when it stops, it stops.
All right, Nick, David, Jeff, it's been a pleasure. I'll miss you guys the next 2 weeks. I run around traveling a bit. carry
Yeah,
on without
have a
me.
great
The show,
time.
the show takes off in massive popularity. You know who to cut. Wait, what's this called? Big announcement coming soon? Yeah.
Have a
5,
great
4,
day,
3.
gentlemen.
All right, talk to you
Yeah.
later.
Bye.
Yeah.